Good morning, children. My name is Richa, and here I am again with my video on life processes part 3. And in this video, we'll be talking about nutrition in humans. I hope you have gone through the other two videos on life processes and it has benefited you. So let's start the chapter. So before I go into the topic of digestion, where we discuss about the various organs involved in the digestion process, or the various organs of the digestive system and how the digestion takes place, let's talk about food first. So what is food? So food is basically of two types, that is diffusible or absorbable food and non-diffusible or non-absorbable food. Now, diffusible food are those food which can dissolve in water and can be easily absorbed by our cells of the body. So those are called as diffusible or absorbable foods, which includes water, minerals, simple sugars, amino acids, vitamins, etc. So these are simpler forms, fatty. So these will get diffused or they will easily get absorbed into the cells of our body, whereas the other type, that is non-diffusible or non-absorbable food, it includes the polymeric form of these simpler foods, that is proteins, carbohydrates, fats, nucleic acids. These cannot get dissolved in water, or they are slightly dissolved in water, and they cannot be taken up by the cells. So these have to be broken down into simpler forms, and there where we require digestion. So we have divided food into basically into two principal types, that is proximate principle of food or food proper, and protective principles of food or food accessories. Now, in the proximate principles of food or food proper, we have macronutrients which provides us energy. Example, carbohydrates, proteins and fats. These are the one which gives us energy. Whereas in the protective principles of food, we have those foods which provides immunity to our body or provides protection to our body, and that those are vitamins, inorganic salts, minerals. These are protective in nature. The food is divided basically into proximate principles of food or food proper and protective principles of food or food accessories. So these complex biomolecules are polymeric organic compounds. What do I mean by polymeric? Means they are formed by the joining together of many monomers. Monomers, if I take in case of carbohydrates, say for example, cellulose is formed by the interlinking of very many glucose molecules. So glucose is the monomeric form, whereas cellulose is the polymeric form. These are called as organic compounds because they basically contains carbon and hydrogens. So complex biomolecules, these molecules are complex because they cannot be used as such. They have to be broken down into smaller forms. So that is about food. Once we are done with this food, we'll talk about digestion. So now we'll define digestion. So digestion is a catabolic process. Now what do I mean by catabolic processes? The process in which larger substances are broken down into smaller forms. Catabolism is breaking down. Anabolism is making it. So it is a catabolic process, not an anabolic process, where smaller molecules form a larger molecules. That is anabolic process. So digestion is a catabolic process by which non-diffusible complex biomolecules. Now you understand what do I mean by non-diffusible complex biomolecules. The one which cannot easily pass through the walls of the cells or cells, diffuse into the cells, are changed into simple and absorbable biomolecules. You know that they are simple sugars, amino acids, fatty acids and glycerols by process of hydrolysis. Hydrolysis means breaking down of complex substances using water. Hydro means water, lysis means breaking down in the presence of digestive enzymes. So these are the digestive enzymes, the one which takes part in the enzymes which take part in digestion, and these enzymes are called as hydrolases. These enzymes uses water to bring about the process of digestion, present in the digestive juices secreted by the digestive glands. So there are many digestive juices in which these enzymes are present, and these digestive juices are secreted by digestive glands. So digestion is a catabolic process by which non-diffusible complex biomolecules are changed into simple and absorbable biomolecules by the process of hydrolysis in the presence of digestive enzymes called hydrolases, present in digestive juices secreted by digestive glands. So digestion has been divided into two types, that is intracellular digestion and intercellular digestion. So intracellular digestion is a type of digestion which occurs inside a food vacuole in the cells, so also called as vacuolar digestion. So digested food diffuses into the cytoplasm. So it is found in macrophages and other lower forms like amoeba, etc. Now intercellular digestion is found in higher forms. So it is more efficient, shows regional differentiation, and it also shows physiological division of labor. So here the digestion of food takes place in different parts and different phases. So it makes digestion easier, at the same time efficient. So in humans it has been divided into four parts, that is ingressive zone, progressive zone, digressive zone and egressive zone. So ingressive zone is that part of the digestion which is involved with intake and mastication of food and includes mouth, lips, buccal cavity, teeth, tongue, etc. So that is ingressive zone. If I go to progressive zone, it is for the conduction and early digestion. So generally the food has to be passed to the proper organ where the proper digestion of food takes place. So this progressive zone allows the conduction and early digestion, and this includes your pharynx, esophagus and stomach. Next is the digressive zone. So it is an area of final digestion where finally the digestion and absorption of food occurs, and it includes your small intestine. The last one is the egressive zone. So it is the place where the food, undigested food, is temporarily stored in the form of fecus, and finally they are expelled outside the body through the anus. So this egressive zone includes your large intestine. So when I talk about the process of digestion, how the enzymes acts in different, how digestion takes place, we will be talking about all these zones in detail. So we'll talk about human digestive system. So digestive system of man is basically divided into two parts, that is the alimentary canal and the digestive glands. So alimentary canal includes mouth, buccopharyngeal cavity, teeth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine and large intestine. Whereas the digestive glands includes salivary glands, gastric glands, liver, pancreas and intestinal glands. So we will be discussing each one of them in detail in my next slides. So now we'll talk about alimentary canal. So our alimentary canal is long sized, about 8 to 10 meters in length. It starts from mouth and ends in anus, and that is why it is called complete. So our alimentary canal is called complete because it has got two openings, mouth and anus. Those alimentary canal where only one opening is present, such type of alimentary canal are said to be incomplete. So we'll talk about all the parts of the alimentary canal in detail now. So mouth. If I talk about mouth, it is a transverse slit, that is horizontal slit, and is bounded by two soft movable lips, also called as labia. So mouth is required for ingestion of food. The food has to be taken in through the mouth. Next is your bucopharyngeal cavity. So bucopharyngeal cavity because it includes buccal cavity and a part of pharynx also. So bucopharyngeal cavity is the space between the skull and the throat. So your bucopharyngeal cavity is divisible into three parts or two parts basically, that is vestibule and buccal or oral cavity. So vestibule is the space bounded by lips and cheeks externally. Externally, the space bounded by your lips and cheeks, and internally the space bounded by gums and teeth is called the vestibule. And here you temporarily store the food when you have to masticate. So before masticating, this temporary storage of food takes place in the vestibule part. The buccal cavity. So it is the space bounded dorsally by palate, means upper part is bounded by palate, and ventrally, that is lower side, by throat. So it has two parts, that is palate and tongue or lingua. So if I tongue or lingua, so tongue is also called as lingua, that is why you have some words comes from linguistic words come from lingua, because our tongue helps in speaking. So if I talk about palate, so our palate is divided into two parts, that is hard palate and soft palate. So hard palates is a bony process of maxilla and palatine bones. If you touch the upper part of your buccal cavity, you will see it is little harder. So this is because it is made up of bone, maxilla and palatine bones. And if you also feel it, you will see there are small folds. You will feel it is little folded. That fold is called as palatine rod, and this is there so that you can grip the food when you are masticating the food. Masticating means you are churning it, chewing it. That is mastication of food. So hard palate help in gripping the food during the mastication process. Now take your tongue and pull it backward and see the back part of your buccal cavity, the upper part is little softer. That is called as soft palate, also called as uvula or velum palati. U-V-U-L-A, uvula or velum palati, V-E-L-U-M-P-A-L-A-T-I, velum palati, and its function is to close the internal layers. Layers means nose. The internal layer part of the nose has to be closed when you are swallowing the food to prevent the food from getting into your food pipe that may result in choking. So soft palate, also called uvula or velum palati, helps in closing the internal layers when food is getting swallowed. Now we have to talk about tongue or lingua. So tongue is a thick musculosensory organ present on the floor of buccal cavity. So tongue is musculosensory. Musculo means made up of muscles, and we know out of 5 sense organ, tongue is one of them. So it helps in sensing. So, and it is present on the floor of the buccal cavity. So its posterior part, the back part, is attached to the floor of the cavity by a soft ligamentous fold. एक ligamentous fold से attached है, and that ligamentous fold is called as lingual frenulum. That ligamentous fold is called as lingual frenulum. Lingual, lingual frenulum, frenulum. So this ligamentous fold holds your tongue to the floor of the cavity. So the dorsum of the tongue, dorsum means the dorsal part, is lined by stratified epithelium. You know the different types of tissues you have studied in class 9th, and has 3 types of lingual papillae. So if I talk about papillae, these are small. So papillae is a small protuberance on the tongue. So it is divided into 4 types, that is circumvallent papillae, fungiform papillae, filiform papillae, and foliate papillae. So we'll talk about circumvallate papillae. If you can see here, this is what is your circumvallate papillae. Circumvallate papillae, they are 8 to 12 in number, largest in size, circular in outline, and lie in an inverted V-shaped manner at the back of the tongue. It is responsible for a special taste and has innervation of nerves. So many sensory nerves are present in this circumvallate papillae. Next is your fungiform papillae. So these are numerous mushroom shaped papillae. Mushroom shaped, that because it is fungus. So because it is mushroom shaped, it is called as fungiform, because mushrooms belong to the family fungus. So fungiform papillae, and they lie on the tip and sides of the tongue. Tip and sides of the tongue, and is red in color. They have taste buds on their upper surface, and that is why you can taste sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and umami foods. So this is mainly involved in tasting the food. Next is your filiform papillae. So these are the most abundant, small size, conical shaped, and present on the anterior 2/3 part of the tongue. Anterior means आगे का, in the front. Anterior 2/3 part of the tongue, and is responsible for sensation of touch. So whenever you touch a food, you get the sensation. Then you have your foliate papillae. So foliate papillae is present at the left side on the upper part, if you see. So these are short vertical folds. They are vertically folded and present on the each side of the tongue. Taste buds, receptors of gustatory sense, are scattered over mucous membrane on their surface. So here you will get all the receptors and taste buds responsible for gustatory sense. So this is about your bucopharyngeal cavity. So this is the structure of digestive system in our body. So it starts from mouth. Then you have these glands, parotid gland just below your external ear. Then you have submandibular near your jawline, and sublingual, that is beneath your tongue. Then you have pharynx, trachea, which goes into the lungs. Then this is the esophagus, which enters into the stomach. Then this is duodenum, and it is small intestine, and this is your large intestine. Now if you see, just this is diaphragm, which separates the thorax part from the abdominal part, and in the posterior part of this uh, diaphragm you have your liver, and beneath it you have your gallbladder. And then you see in the U-turn of the duodenum you have your pancreas. So about the individual organ we'll discuss when we talk about this diagram. The most important that you have to remember is this position of liver, pancreas, and how this thing trachea and esophagus looks like, because this will be required in my coming slides. So we'll talk about teeth in this slide. So teeth in men are present in both the jaws and they are embedded in the jaws. That is why they are called as thecodont. If I talk about the development of teeth in humans, they develop 2 times in the lifetime, and that is why they are called as diphyodont. So initial one is they are called as milk or temporary or deciduous teeth, which occurs in the childhood, and they have 20 in number. So if I talk about the numbers, 4 incisors, 2 canines and 4 molars in one jaw. That means 10 in one jaw. So the lower jaw also has the same count of incisors, canines and molars, making the total count as 20. Once these milk or temporary or deciduous teeth fall off, they start falling at the age of from the age of 6 years. Permanent teeth come out, and these permanent teeth are 32 in number. So if I take the count, then we have 4 incisors, 2 canines and 4 molars with 4 premolars and 6 molars. So in the upper jaw you have 16 teeth. So lower jaw also has the same count of incisors, canines, premolars and molars, making the total count as 32. However, the third pair of molars of permanent set, they come out or erupt at between the age of 18 to 25th year, and sometimes they do not appear at all. So these are called as wisdom teeth. So if I talk about permanent teeth are of 4 types. Incisors, that is cutting teeth, they help in biting. Canine or tearing teeth, they help in cutting the flesh, tearing the flesh. They are dagger shaped, just like a dagger. And then you have premolars and molars. They are also called as grinding teeth or cheek teeth. So they are cusped and crowned. They are flat surface, so increases the surface area. So for better action of enzyme and proper mastication of food can be done with the help of these molars and premolars. So that's about teeth. So now we will talk about the structure of tooth. So tooth is basically divided into 3 parts, that is crown, neck and root. So in the crown portion, if you see, you have this enamel, white colored. It is the hardest material found in your body. Below it is the dentine, and below that is your pulp chamber. Now dentine is a part of the root, and this dentine is secreted by cells called as odontoblasts, which are present in your pulp chamber. Now if you see here, blue and red line, these are arteries and veins which is present in your tooth. So they form the root canal. So root canal, you must have heard about root canal therapy, right? So this happens when your tooth becomes infected, cavities form and it gets inflated. When this part gets inflamed, it has to be cleaned to remove the infection and to relieve you of the pain. Now this crown part is embedded in the gum at the neck portion. From the neck, if you see, this is the root portion, down one is the root portion. where the and root canal extend below that to the end. So this root part is attached to the gum by a periodontal ligament, the white one, that is your periodontal ligament, which attaches your tooth to the gum. And then you have lower portion, so it goes till your jawbone. So this is how the structure of tooth looks like. So now we'll talk about pharynx. So pharynx, if you see, it is a funnel shaped structure. Why I'm calling it as funnel shaped structure? Like if you look at this structure, it looks like the mouth of the funnel, and this part looks like its tubal part, the lower part. So this is why it is called as funnel shaped structure, and is found behind the soft palate. So this is your buccal cavity or oral cavity, and it is found behind this soft palate, where food channel and air channel cross each other. Now this is your food channel and this is your air channel, and they cross each other. That is why it is called, that is where it is found. So it is divided into three parts, that is nasopharynx, oropharynx and laryngopharynx. So now nasopharynx, why it is called as nasopharynx? Because it is found in the nasal cavity. So this is our nasopharynx, found in the nasal cavity. Then you have oropharynx because it is found near the oral cavity. And then you have laryngopharynx because it is found in the larynx part. So here its division occurs, right? Here the division occurs. This one forms the esophagus or the food pipe, and this forms the trachea or the windpipe. And here it is, this opening is covered by an epiglottis. It's a flap-like structure, muscular flap-like structure, which prevents the food from entering the trachea. So by mistake, if food enters into the trachea, it is expelled out. You start coughing, right? So that is a process of removing that food particle from your windpipe. But if it stays in the trachea for a long time, person may get choked. So now I'll look at, so these are the different parts of a pharynx. Now if you see, this is the entrance of the eustachian tube. Eustachian tube, you will see it comes from the ear part and it joins here. So eustachian tube is mainly involved in maintaining the air balance. Now this is your nasal cavity. I have already talked about soft palate, hard palate, oral cavity, tongue, epiglottis. Then this is larynx and this is trachea. So this is the anatomy of pharynx, and this is how the pharynx looks like. So now we will be talking about esophagus. So if I talk about esophagus, it is a long 20 to 25 centimeter narrow muscular and tubular structure. Muscular means it is mainly made up of muscles, and it is a tube-like structure. So it runs downward from your neck, just behind the trachea. We have learned this in the previous slide, and passes through diaphragm. So what is diaphragm? Diaphragm is a structure which muscular structure which separates the upper part, that is the thorax, from the abdominal cavity, and finally it opens in the stomach, in the abdomen. So its inner mucosa means inner lining. This inner lining is raised into longitudinal folds. It has got many longitudinal folds. Why it is folds? Folds help it is in extending. It's whenever food enters into it, it may extend. So this will help, and this is called as esophageal rogue. So it conducts the food to stomach by a process called as peristalsis. Now what is peristalsis? It is a constriction and relaxation. Constriction and relaxation when the bolus or the food moves through the alimentary canal or through the esophagus. So this process of peristalsis takes place in the entire alimentary canal. So it is an involuntary constriction. Why I am calling it as involuntary constriction? Because in this, the constriction and relaxation of this esophagus is not under our direct control. So that is why it is called as involuntary constriction and relaxation of the muscles of the intestine or another canal, creating a wave-like movement. So if you see, it creates a wave-like movement that push the contents in the canal forward. So this is what is called as peristalsis. So that is how esophagus helps in the movement of the food. So now we will be talking about our next organ, that is the stomach. So a stomach is a J-shaped organ which is thick and muscular. Thick and muscular means thick as well as it is mostly made up of muscles. So our muscle has been divided into three parts, that is your cardiac stomach, the fundic part, and then the pyloric antrum. So if I talk about the cardiac stomach, if you look into the diagram, this is the cardiac portion. So what happens is this receives the esophagus. This receives the esophagus. So this is where you have this esophagus entering the stomach, and there is an aperture here. Aperture means a hole, an opening, which is guarded by a sphincter. We call it as a cardiac sphincter. What is a sphincter? It is a muscular flap-like structure which prevents regurgitation of food. Regurgitation means backward flow of the food into the esophagus. That is called as regurgitation of food. So this is what is your cardiac sphincter, and this part of your stomach is your cardiac stomach. So next is your fundic part. Fundic part, if you see, this part is your fundus. This part is your fundus. So generally what happens, this extended portion, the distal part, it is also called as greater curvature, projects above the cardiac aperture. It projects above the cardiac aperture, and these often contain gas and air. So this part is where mostly the food digestion takes place. So this is the fundic part. If you see, it is made up of three different types of muscles: longitudinal muscles, circular muscles, and oblique muscles. And this is the rog of mucosa, means here also you have got folds. Why these folds? As I have already told you, these folds help the stomach to extend whenever you eat your food. If it is eaten in a little larger amount, your stomach extends to accommodate that food. So this is what is your fundic part of the stomach. Then next is your pyloric antrum. So pyloric antrum is the distal and the narrower part of the stomach, which opens in the duodenum. It opens into the duodenum, which is a part of the small intestine, by an aperture called as pyloric aperture. Here is your pyloric aperture, and this pyloric aperture is guarded by a pyloric sphincter. Again, it is a flap-like structure which prevents backflow of food from duodenum into the stomach, and this part is known as pyloric canal. So again, as I said, it does not allow the food to enter back into the stomach. So the inner mucosa, the inner lining of the stomach has got folds, longitudinal folds, which are called as gastric rog or rog of mucosa, and these rog help in the dilation of the stomach to store the food and also increase the surface area of digestion. So that is how the structure of your stomach looks like, and this helps in the digestion of food. So before I go into the topic of digestion where we discuss about the various organs involved in the digestion process or the various organs of the digestive system and how the digestion takes place, let's talk about food first. So what is food? So food is basically of two types, that is diffusible or absorbable food and non-diffusible or non-absorbable food. Now diffusible food are those food which can dissolve in water and can be easily absorbed by our cells of the body. So those are called as diffusible or absorbable foods, which includes water, minerals, simple sugars, amino acids, vitamins, etc. So these are simpler forms, fatty. So these will get diffused or they will easily get absorbed into the cells of our body, whereas the other type, that is non-diffusible or non-absorbable food, it includes the polymeric form of these simpler foods, that is proteins, carbohydrates, fats, nucleic acids. These cannot get dissolved in water, or they are slightly dissolved in water and they cannot be taken up by the cells. So these have to be broken down into simpler forms, and there where we require digestion. So we have divided food into basically into two principal types, that is proximate principle of food or food proper and protective principles of food or food accessories. Now in the proximate principles of food or food proper, we have macronutrients which provides us energy. The last organ of the digestive system, that is your large intestine. So we'll be talking about large intestine in detail now. So large intestine is almost 5 feet long. So large intestine is not large. In fact, the small intestine, though the name is a small, it is the largest part of the intestine, that is it is larger than the small intestine. Only since it is occupied in a small portion, we call it as a small intestine. So it is shorter and wider than a small intestine and it forms an arc around the small intestine. So large intestine is divided into three parts, that is cecum, colon and rectum. And colon is finally divided into three parts, that is ascending colon, transverse colon and descending colon. So if I'll describe these structure in my next slide, that is here. So if you see, this is the structure of your large intestine and it is divided into three parts, that is cecum, then this entire part is your colon, and then you have this as rectum. So cecum is a pouch like a structure, small pouch like a structure, which ends into a tubular structure called as vermiform appendix. This is the vermiform appendix. And cecum and vermiform appendix both are vestigial in nature. Vestigial in nature means they do not perform any function in our body. That is why sometimes when this appendix gets inflamed, we call it as appendicitis, and when it is inflamed, we have to remove it by a surgery. So that is called as appendicitis. So this is what is your vermiform appendix. Then your large intestine is divided into, this is the colon, so it is divided based on this, it is divided into three parts, that is ascending colon, then you have transverse colon, and then you have descending colon. So ascending colon extends up to the liver. So your liver is somewhere here, and here then it takes a right side bend on the right side, and then it bends to go to the transverse colon. So this transverse colon crosses abdominal cavity just below the pancreas. So here you will have pancreas. We'll discuss this in the entire structure of the body. and then you have this descending colon which running downward on the left side and is sigmoid. Sigmoid, why I call it as sigmoid? Because it is structure is like a sigma, that is why it is called as sigmoid colon. It is why it is called as sigmoid colon. Now, so it is concerned with the conservation of water, sodium or other minerals and formation of fecus. Then you go to the rectum part. That is, this one is your rectum part. So it is a slightly dilated part and concerned with the temporary storage of fecus. Your fecus is stored here temporarily. That is your rectum, and it opens out through the anal canal into the anus. So the fecus which is stored in the rectum is expelled out by through the anus, passing through the anal canal, and this is guarded by two anal sphincter muscles. So as again I said, it is guarded by, so every aperture is guarded by a sphincter muscle. So here also it is guarded by anal sphincter muscles. So its mucosa means inner lining is is raised into folds, which is we called it as rectal rog. Why is it? Again, to increase whenever it dilates or increases in size, this fold helps it to increase in its size whenever fecus is stored in it. So it helps in dilation of the rectum. So now we will be talking about the human digestive glands. We have already talked about human alimentary canal. Now we'll talk about human digestive glands. So human digestive glands is divided into 5 types, that is salivary gland, gastric gland, liver, pancreas and intestinal glands. So now we'll talk about salivary glands. So salivary glands is of 3 types, that is parotid or cheek glands, submaxillary or submandibular glands and sublingual glands. So these parotid or cheek glands, they are the largest salivary glands which are just found below the external ear. The external ear where it ends, you have this parotid or cheek glands. Then you have the submaxillary or submandibular glands. So these submaxillary or submandibular glands lie beneath the jaw angles. The angles of your jaw is where the submaxillary or submandibular glands are found. And then you have sublingual glands. Lingual means related to tongue. So these are the smallest sized and are found beneath your tongue and open at the floor of the cavity. There where you have got your sublingual glands. Now these salivary glands, their function is to secrete saliva. Saliva mainly consists of an enzyme called as salivary amylase, which helps in digestion, and we will discuss about this when we go into the topic where we see how digestion takes place and what are the enzymes involved, how they act. So in a day, salivary gland secretes about 1 to 1.5 liters of saliva. So in this slide, we'll talk about gastric glands. So it is a tubular gland present in the mucosa of your stomach, that is gastric. That is why it is called as gastric glands. Now there are different types of cells which have different functions. So these are chief or peptic cells, which we also call them as zymogen cells. Now these zymogen cells secrete 2 proenzymes. Now why proenzymes? Because these are the enzymes which is in inactive form just before they start functioning as enzymes. So these 2 proenzymes are pepsinogen and prorenin. Pepsinogen and prorenin helps in the digestion of protein. We'll talk about it in detail. And an enzyme, gastric lipase. So lipase comes from the word lipid. So it helps in the digestion of lipids. So pepsinogen and prorenin. Why these enzymes are released in inactive form? Because if it is released in active form, whenever your stomach does not have food, it will corrode the mucosa or the inner lining of the stomach. So to prevent it from acting on its own cell, it is released in the inactive form, and they are converted into active form only when food enters the stomach. Next is the oxyntic cells or parietal cells. So these oxyntic or parietal cells secrete HCl, an intrinsic factor of calcium. So this intrinsic factor of calcium helps in the absorption of vitamin B12. Now what is the function of HCl in the body? We'll talk about it in detail. Just want to brief you. HCl helps in converting this proenzyme into enzymes. At the same time, this HCl kills any germs which is present in the food. Now you have goblet cells which secrete mucus. So it does not only helps in making the food smooth, but at the same time it protects the inner lining of the stomach from getting corroded by HCl. Next is argentafin cells. So they are mainly found in the pyloric glands, which is found in the pyloric part of the stomach, and they secrete a hormone called as gastrin. So now we will talk about the largest gland in our body, that is liver. So liver is the largest gland and it is reddish brown in color, and it weighs around 1.2 to 1.5 kg in adult men. So it is present in the posterior concavity of the diaphragm. I have already explained to you in my previous slide about when I was talking about the digestive system and its structure. And it is attached to diaphragm by a ligament called a suspensory ligament. Now it is multilobulated gland, means it is made up of many lobules. So there are 4 lobules in fact, but when you look from upwards, it looks only 2 lobulated, that is left and right. But when you see it from below, it is 4 lobules. So this is the 4 lobules. You see left lobule, right lobule, then you have caudate lobe, and then you have a quadrate lobe. So the hepatic lobules are the structural and functional units of liver. So these contain hepatic cells. Hepatic cells means liver cells. So these are the hepatic lobules, and in it are present the hepatic cells. So hepatic cells generally form a radiating cords. We call them as hepatic laminae, and they have a space called as hepatic lacunae between them. So that is how your liver looks like. However, on the lower surface of the right liver lobe, that is right liver lobe, there is a thin walled pear-shaped sac called as gallbladder. We'll discuss about this gallbladder in my next slide. So now this is gallbladder. So on the lower surface of the right liver lobe, which I showed in the previous slide, is a pear shaped. So if you look at the structure of this, it looks like a pear shaped sac called as gallbladder. So this is what is your gallbladder. So the main function of the gallbladder is to concentrate or store the bile juice which is secreted by liver. Now here is the cystic duct, and these are the hepatic ducts. So the bile juice produced by the liver enters this hepatic duct, joins this cystic duct, and together they form a common bile duct. So this common bile duct then comes and attaches to this pancreatic duct. At a point where they join, it is called as hepatopancreatic ampulla or water. It is little swollen here and it forms hepatopancreatic ampulla or water. And just before opening into the duodenum, it opens into the duodenum. You remember when I talked about duodenum, I said hepatopancreatic duct enters the duodenum, and its opening into the duodenum is guarded by a sphincter, muscle sphincter called as a sphincter of Oddi. So in a day, a liver secretes about 600 to 1200 ml of bile. So the next gland that we will be talking about is pancreas. So pancreas is the second largest gland in human body and it is yellow in color, present in the loop of duodenum. I have already shown you when I have shown you this entire structure of digestive system. So it is compound or heterocrine glands. Why I call it as compound or heterocrine glands? Because it has both exocrine glands as well as endocrine glands. Now what is endocrine glands? Endocrine glands release the chemical substance directly into the bloodstream, whereas exocrine glands release the chemical through a duct, like you saw in this pancreatic duct. So the exocrine part of the pancreas releases it into a duct, while as endocrine part of pancreas releases it into the blood. So here we will be talking about exocrine part of the pancreas. So exocrine gland is formed of large number of lobules or acini, and each acinus has a number of glandular cells. Glandular cells means the cells which acts as gland and secrete pancreatic juices. Now this pancreatic juice has a pH of 8.8 and is drained by a pancreatic duct, which we saw when we were talking about the structure of gallbladder. So in a day, pancreatic juice released is about 500 ml. The next gland that we will be talking about is the intestinal glands. So these glands will be found in the intestine. So there are two types. These are crypts of Lieberkühn. So these are multicellular, many cells, simple, straight, tubular glands which is present between the villi. So they are present between the villi and they secrete digestive enzymes as well as mucus. Whereas so digestive enzymes helps in the digestion of the food and mucus makes it slimy. At the same time protects the inner lining of the intestine. Next is your Brunner's glands. So these are compound tubular glands which are found in submucosa of duodenum. So mucosa is the outermost lining and inside it you have the submucosa of the duodenum, and these secrete alkaline, watery and enzyme-free mucoid fluid. So this mucoid fluid does not have any enzyme in it. Now why it is alkaline? Because in duodenum when the food comes it is mixed with HCl. So this alkaline watery fluid neutralizes the acidic part or acidic action of the HCl and protects the duodenal mucosa or from acidic chyme which comes from the stomach. The secretion of both these glands is collectively called as intestinal juices or also called as succus intricus. So the entire mucosa of alimentary canal is also lined by goblet cells which secrete the mucus. So that's it about the structure of the digestive system in human beings. In my next video, I'll be talking about how the process of digestion takes place, and I'll be explaining the entire enzymatic actions which take place in each part of the digestive system and the alimentary canal. So we'll talk about teeth in this slide. So teeth in men are present in both the jaws and they are embedded in the jaws. That is why they are called as thecodont. If I talk about the development of teeth in humans, they develop 2 times in the lifetime, and that is why they are called as diphyodont. So initial one they are called as milk or temporary or deciduous teeth, which occurs in the childhood and they have 20 in number. So if I talk about the numbers, 4